Imagine you are sitting in a room, and somewhere across that room, someone is laughing very loudly. Not because something is genuinely funny, just a laugh released into the air as if the entire world needs to know that person exists in that space. Their voice rises above every other conversation happening nearby. Big gestures, expansive energy, pulling every eye in the room toward them. And you sit quietly, watching, and you feel something begin to tighten somewhere inside your chest. Not exactly anger, not exactly envy. Something more vague than that, sharper than that, and strangely, very familiar. You have felt this before, perhaps more than once. Perhaps you have told yourself you are simply introverted, or simply incompatible with people like that. But something in you knows the story does not end there, because why would someone else's noise have the power to unsettle you this deeply? Why would the oversized presence of another human being, someone you do not even know, pull you out of yourself so quickly and so completely? And more importantly, what does that say about you? There is an answer to that question. Not the motivational kind of answer, not the just learn to accept differences kind. The real answer lives much deeper than that. Inside a psychological structure you began building long before you knew you were building it. And by the end of this video, you will understand it in a way you have never been able to see before. People tend to assume that disliking loudness is just a personality trait, that you were either born preferring silence or you were not, and the story stops there. But modern psychology, and particularly what Carl Jung described as the shadow inside every person, suggests that our strongest reactions to other people are rarely actually about them. They are about us, not in a self-blaming sense, but in this sense. Every time someone else's presence pulls you tight, something inside you is being touched, and that something needs to be seen. Think about this. When you encounter a loud person, you are not simply processing sound. You are processing a whole set of signals about power, about recognition, about social space. The loud person occupies room. They exist without asking permission. They do not edit themselves before expressing. And for many people, especially those who grew up in environments where self-expression was closely controlled, that creates a friction that does not stay at the surface of social interaction. It goes directly into the nervous system. There is a concept in psychology called sensory overload, but that is only the outermost layer. Beneath it, many researchers focus on something called threat appraisal. The brain does not only categorize what is physically dangerous, it also categorizes what is dangerous to our identity, to the image we hold of ourselves and our place in the world. And when someone occupies too much space, your brain begins, without conscious permission, to calculate. If they are allowed to exist like this, what does that mean for me? That question sounds far too heavy for something as simple as sitting next to someone laughing loudly in a coffee shop. But that is precisely the point. Our emotional reactions are almost never proportional to the surface situation. They are usually echoes of something older, deeper, and unresolved. And what you feel in the presence of a loud person, if you actually sit with it instead of pushing it away, may be one of the most important doors you can open to understand yourself. Now let us move slowly into the real psychology. The first insight is this: discomfort around loud people is usually not a reaction to noise. It is a reaction to a freedom you do not allow yourself to have. Think about the last time you wanted to express something strongly, wanted to laugh without restraint, wanted to take up space, wanted to be seen, and you held yourself back. Perhaps because you feared judgment. Perhaps because, from a very young age, you were taught that being loud was rude, uncultured, unacceptable, and over time, you wove that self-censorship so deeply into your value system that you stopped recognizing it as censorship at all. Jung described the things we refuse in ourselves as the shadow. Not shadow in the sense of evil, in the sense of the parts of who you are that you learned to hide because they were not welcomed. When you see someone else living those parts freely, without apology, without shame, it activates a reaction that people often mistake for contempt, but is actually recognition. A painful recognition that what you were not permitted to do, someone else is doing, and the world hasn't collapsed. That recognition can be deeply uncomfortable, and rather than face it, the brain is very skilled at converting it into a moral judgment. That person is so inconsiderate. That person has no self-awareness. That person doesn't know how to respect others. Those judgments are not entirely wrong, but they are usually just the surface layer covering something underneath that you are not yet ready to look at directly. Contempt is actually an arrow, and that arrow always points inward. The second insight runs deeper and may be harder to sit with. The people who are most sensitive to external noise are often the ones carrying the heaviest noise inside. This is not abstract theory. Research on sensory processing sensitivity suggests that roughly 20% of the population has a nervous system calibrated to pick up more stimulation, process it more deeply, and react more intensely. But the important thing is not that number. The important thing is how those people learn to manage their inner world. When the inner world is full of thoughts not yet processed, emotions not yet named, fears not yet acknowledged, a single source of external stimulation, however small, can become genuinely unbearable. Not because the stimulation is too large, but because the cup inside is already almost full. And the loud person, in a sense, is simply the last drop. That means the issue is never really the loud person. The issue is what you have not yet allowed yourself to sit still and feel. The third insight is where things become genuinely interesting. There is a type of person who dislikes loudness, not because they are overly sensitive, but because they spent too many years learning to make themselves smaller to keep others comfortable. They learned that staying silent was safe, that not taking up space was polite, that their own needs needed to stand behind everyone else's. And after years of that, someone who does not censor themselves is not just irritating. It is an offense against every quiet sacrifice they have made. Why do they get to exist like that when you do not? Who told you that you were not allowed? Do you actually believe that? Or are you simply following a rule you never consciously chose? Let those questions stay here for a moment. No need to answer immediately. Just feel the weight of them. Because here is what is actually happening when you sit in that room and feel that irritation rising toward the loud person. You are not just reacting to them. You are making contact with a part of yourself that you have learned not to listen to. And that part is hungry. It wants to live. It wants to occupy space. It wants to exist without asking permission first. Now that you have gone far enough inward, the question becomes, what do you do with this? The first principle is to recognize that discomfort is a message, not a problem to be solved. When you feel disturbed by someone loud, instead of immediately finding a way out of that feeling, by leaving, by judging them, by telling yourself you simply need more quiet, try pausing for one moment and asking, what inside me is being touched right now? This does not ask you to have an answer immediately. It simply asks you to open the door rather than close it, like walking through a forest and suddenly feeling cold. You do not need to know why right away, but you notice the cold, and that noticing is already the first step toward understanding what is happening. Ask yourself, what this is activating in me is not about them. So what inside me is it about? The second principle is learning to distinguish between a real boundary and a defensive wall. Not every discomfort around loudness needs to be resolved by opening up more. Sometimes you genuinely need quiet space, Sometimes a loud person is genuinely crossing a reasonable line. But the difference between a healthy boundary and a defensive wall is this. A healthy boundary comes from clarity about your needs, while a defensive wall comes from fear of being touched. Someone with a healthy boundary can say, "I need quiet right now," without feeling angry. Someone behind a defensive wall will feel offended, attacked, threatened, even when the other person is simply existing. Recognizing which side you are on is not self-blame, it is self-knowledge. The third principle is to practice reclaiming your own space in small and conscious ways. If your reaction to loud people comes largely from years of making yourself small, the answer is not to learn to tolerate them better. The answer is to learn to occupy your own space more fully. Not by being loud, if that is not who you are. Not by expressing yourself the way they do, but in your own way. Say the opinion you usually keep inside. Sit the way that is actually comfortable instead of contracting yourself. Express disagreement when you disagree. These small actions rebuild something that years of self-censorship have quietly worn down. The felt sense that you have the right to exist fully. And when that sense is restored, you will notice something strange. Loud people start to bother you less. Not because they changed, but because you no longer need them to make themselves smaller for you to feel safe. The fourth principle is to practice understanding instead of judgment. This does not mean you have to like loud people or believe that all loud behavior is fine. It means, when you feel pulled tight by someone, instead of stopping at the judgment, "This person is so inconsiderate," try asking instead, "What taught this person that this is how to exist?" This is not an exercise in forgiveness. This is an exercise in curiosity. And curiosity, in a very practical way, is the antidote to resentment. If you find this kind of conversation useful, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, perhaps this is the moment to do that, because there are many more conversations like this one waiting for you. And now, we arrive at the thing I have most wanted to say to you. Throughout this entire video, we have spoken about the loud person as if they were the center of the story, but they are not. You are the center. They are only the mirror. And the paradox, the thing that perhaps no one has ever said quite this directly to you, is the person you resent for being too loud has been teaching you something about the part of yourself you most need to hear. Not that you should become like them, not that their way is right and yours is wrong, but that there is a part of you that wants permission to exist, that wants to be seen, that wants to stop asking for clearance before occupying space. And that part, for however many years it has been pressed down very deep, because you believed that was what you needed to do, to be liked, to be accepted, to be safe. Perhaps it is time to stop pressing down. Your silence is not proof of your sophistication. Your smallness is not proof of your maturity. Sometimes they are simply fear-based habits that have been running on default for a very long time. You are allowed to take up space, not loudly if you do not want to, but fully, genuinely, in your own way. And that, perhaps, is the lesson the loud person you resented never meant to teach you.